Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. It's Monday night. We've had a week off from it, but me and Mark are back asking the same question we ask every Monday night. Mark, what is going on? What's going on with you, mate?
Well, just survived another England game. That wasn't fun for 70 minutes, was it? It's not looking good for the World Cup. But yeah, we're. I think we've got other fish to fry tonight because the international window has not been kind.
No, it certainly hasn't, mate. It certainly hasn't. But we're going to get stuck into it in a minute. And obviously, for the first time in a long time, Newcastle have actually got a vested interest in England games a bit more, mate. But we'll get stuck into that in a minute. Just before we do a little bit of housekeeping for everybody who's tuned in, if you haven't already, please click that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. I think we're sitting on about 1839 subscribers now, which is amazing. So we're so close to 1900. Just keep smashing that button, hit that bell. You'll never miss, the live shows that we do, What's Going on Mondays, or the Evermore podcast every Wednesdays, and then also the pop-up videos that we do, little rumor has it here and there, previews and everything. All free content. We don't tend to sting anybody, and we're not going to put any more burden on anybody in the cost of living crisis. It's just us
Definitely
talking
not.
about Newcastle United, and Monday night is really just a bit of a shit shooting exercise. That was hard to say. Imagine that after 3 points. So we'll get stuck in, and we're live as well as always. Jump in the comments. It really helps the channel flow. We've already got a couple in there already, which we're going to get stuck into in a minute. So we might as well kick straight after the mark. So international mags. Obviously, it's been the international break. I fucking hate the international break. It's so dull. Honestly, I'm so turned off by international football these days. I used to really enjoy it. For anybody who's listening who doesn't know, I was born Scottish, so I had the curse and the burden of supporting the Scottish national team, whose World Cup anthem at one point was "Don't Come Home Too Soon." So that tells you that's a great band, but that tells you how optimistic Scotland were in World Cups when I was growing up. But I used to really enjoy it, the passion and everything else about international football, but it's just become so commercial now. It's just so shite. There's, nations leagues and, I don't know, flag of the year or some crap like that. And it just bores the crap out of me. We were talking just before, come on, Mark. There's a real lack of passion now, isn't there, playing for your country? Just going through the motions, like playing against guys that work in Aldi and Latvia and stuff. What's the fucking point in it half the time, honestly? Bores the shit out of me, really.
To be honest, when you're talking about flags, I thought you were going to break into fun with flags with Dr. Sheldon Cooper. There you go.
Fun with flags. International break is not fun for me, man. I hate it. And I hate it more in a minute. We'll get into that, but I fucking hate it generally. It's so boring.
It's one of those things. I have always watched, and I probably will always watch England. It's one of those things. I think I'm one of the sad few that just long for a time when we're actually going to be successful, even though it's probably never going to come. I think we've been as close as we'll get. I had this chat the other day where when you look at the way that England play, we're just not at that level to be in a tournament winner, and it just depresses you constantly. I'm 40 years of let's go back, maybe 30 years of depression since 1990, because I think we actually had a setup that was geared to win then. But I don't know. The international break just takes you away from the Premier League, and I know that's pretty much everybody's main focus. There's very few that are England first, club second. Now it's mostly club first, country second.
Unless you're Michael Owen, of course. Then it's obviously England first. Unless it's England first.
You had to swear this early, didn't you?
I did. Certainly over Newcastle United as well. But we've got some comments coming in. Jimmy's in the comments, Nash is in the comments. Ash said he turned the game off because it was absolutely shite. I mean, we might as well get stuck into the international mags, and obviously we had a vested interest. We've got some comments there as well on England, which would be good to get through in a minute, Mark. But the goalkeeper, obviously, was our goalkeeper, was Nick Pope, the one and only Nick Pope, better than the Burger King Whopper, in goal for 2 games. Obviously, 1-0 defeat against Italy. Kieran Trippier was unused sub in both the games. So Nick Pope's conceded 4 goals in 2 games. That's right. How do you rate the Pope, mate? How do you think he's done for England in between the sticks these last 2 games?
Tonight, yes, he's gifted Havertz a goal tonight.
That was a bit of a mess. Yeah,
he's looked nervous tonight. I think that's one of the comments as well, that he looked nervous. But I'm sorry, if you're playing behind Harry Maguire, you're going to look nervous. He is just the worst England centre back now I think I've ever seen. And at one point, I thought he was very, very good. But I think I said to you before we came on, there are about 450,000 centre-backs in England that deserve that place better than he does. And a lot of them play for the under-6s in schools because he's just a complete liability. He's so poor.
There is one, and I've got to get this in early. And I think Jody Toonfalai's touching this, which we'll put up in a minute. But how in the name of Holy Christ does Dan Burn not get into that England setup ahead of Harry Maguire? I mean, that is unbelievable, man. It really, really is. I just can't understand that.
I get you have trust in players, but you have to, as a manager, see how woefully out of form somebody is and go, do you know what? It might not be right to pick him. And he was shocking at the weekend, and he was shocking again tonight.
When was the last time he was good? When was the last time he was actually good, Harry Maguire? When was the last time you watched him play and go, he's all right in that game?
He came into the Euros after, sitting out the first few games when Tyrone Mings played. And I thought he came in and he looked okay, but he was still shaky. He didn't look the same Harry Maguire that had played a couple of, in that England setup a couple of years before. He's just, he has no confidence at all. He is completely devoid of any confidence. He's not playing regularly for Manchester United now. He's out of the side there. He makes mistake after mistake after mistake. He gets caught out of position. He lunges into tackles. He can't read the ball anymore. His only good sort of part of his game, which sort of was carrying the ball out of defence. He's not doing that anymore. He played a few good balls first half that could have got England motoring forward, but he's such a liability. You saw with a penalty tonight, there was a tackle he tried to make on is it Musiala later on, and he throws himself from about 5 yards away to try and get, and he gets absolutely nowhere near. Those are the desperate tackles of somebody who just is completely devoid of any sort of form of confidence, and he should be nowhere near the starting lineup. I'm absolutely fed up watching him. Yeah. He needs to be dropped.
You're channeling your inner Roy Keane there, mate. Maguire, you make a walk back from the stadium. I love it, mate. I love it. But Ash is saying that he did an article the other day. It said Burn probably wasn't good enough for England, but he was wrong. He's miles ahead of Minecraft. And Jody Toonfalai say he doesn't blame Maguire. This is all in Southgate going back in time. When he was decent, he has to take him out of the firing line. Absolutely, yes. I totally agree with that.
That is
Jody
purely on the manager. Harry Maguire can only turn up and play. And in fairness to him, he does. But this stops at Southgate's door because he is the one that continually is picking him and playing him. And not only playing him, but he's starting him. And he's starting him in games against two of the top 15 sides in the world, because I'm not sure Germany are quite all there. And Italy are improving again since their blip after the Euros. But it's just, I'm completely fed up with it. It's almost like the Pickford argument, and we watch Pickford week in, week out in the Premier League, and he looks dreadful. Yes, he pulled off some great saves the other day, but
this is a great point by PDK. I've heard this a couple of times. We were talking about this earlier on in the Evermore WhatsApp chat, weren't we? Now, this is an interesting quandary, isn't it? Because I suppose you got to look at it. I think the answer is no, a stone cold no. Would the FA bin Southgate before the World Cup? I think it's a stone cold no. I think they let him go to the tournament, regardless of how shite you've been in these Nations League games. But the question is if England come calling, does Eddie Howe say no? Is he in a better position now as a Newcastle manager, knowing how quickly that could change? And does he pass up the opportunity to manage England if it comes to him on a plate? What do you think, mate?
I don't think Southgate's going anywhere for now. I think he's got the World Cup. I think because we've got no other games now, our next game it hits the World Cup, isn't it? So he's not going anywhere. There's no time to bring in a new manager and bed in anything different. So we're stuck. But it is. I guess it is a worry. If Newcastle doesn't progress as far or as maybe as they would like over the next couple of months, if the project seems to have stalled, does he take that opportunity to go, well, I don't know. I kind of like to think not, because he's only been there short term, hasn't he? He's been there,
and he's still quite young, isn't he? I mean, with Southgate, he went off the boil at Middlesbrough, bombed a bit at Middlesbrough, didn't he? And it ended badly for him, and he ended up in the under-21s, which is where kind of young managers who fail go to reinvent themselves. Like you think of AD Boothroyd and guys like that all go in there, try and reinvent themselves. And a manager like Eddie Howe didn't need to do that. He went away after a wonderful experience at Bournemouth to come back a better manager than he was. And I think he's already won enough plaudits that if the Newcastle job didn't go well for him, and either we got rid of him or he threw in the towel or whatever, I think he would get another job as a top flight manager. I don't think Southgate necessarily would have at that time when he took the England job. Do you think I'm right there, mate?
Nobody was calling for Southgate. No. Absolutely not. And they talked in the press about and stuff. And I think it's been on social media that if he was to go when the likes of Manchester United were looking for manager, they should go for Southgate. Nobody's looking at Gareth Southgate as a club manager because he's not going to bring any success to you at all. No. He did a very good job, I think, with the under-21s, and I thought that I sort of backed it because I thought he'd bring that style through, or not style, but he'll bring that sort of knowledge of the younger players through with him, bring a lot of them into the setup, which he has done, to be fair.
It worked quite well for a while. You had the likes of the Arsenal boys coming through, didn't you? All that kind of stuff.
But he stifled them. I mean, for 70 minutes tonight, we looked. Oh well, to be fair, we started off quite brightly, and it looked like let's get the tempo. Let's go at them a little bit, and it looked like we were going to do it, and then it disappeared completely. And then second half, it was utterly shambolic. There are times when England over the last couple of games have looked like they've never met each other, and these are our best players supposedly. Supposedly. And it took until 65, 70 minutes tonight for them to show any sort of fired upness. There was a challenge after Mason Mount came on, I think after he'd scored, where he went headlock, charging after the ball, put a chance, and it was that adrenaline pumping. Come on, let's everybody get this aggressive, dynamic, fast tempo, direct sort of style of play that England are good at. Why the freaking hell do we not play like this all the time? Do you think
there's a bit of truth there with what Ash is saying? I know it's probably a bit tongue in cheek, but do you think since Graham Jones walked away, do you think that's affected Southgate a little bit? Do you think Graham Jones is probably a better coach than people are giving him credit for?
I think maybe that suited that he has that that extra level of coaching that goes into that England squad. We've seen it before when sort of number twos have walked away where the manager isn't quite as successful because they've lost their main source of coaching and that, and he hasn't been quite right. Absolutely right. I think that's possibly part of it. I also agree with the next comment from Ash that I've just seen in there as well about playing Saka at left.
Jesus Christ, yeah. That is dreadful. What a waste of a player. What a waste of a player.
Well, he showed tonight. He showed absolutely tonight. He changed, when him and Matt came on, changed the game. They were much more direct.
If you had a more exciting manager, I mean, let's just say for argument's sake, Graham Potter didn't go to Chelsea and he'd taken the England job. Southgate got binned. Imagine what he could have done with those players, the way he plays and the football philosophy he plays. If I was Potter, I probably would have went there instead of Chelsea. But Tune for Life saying that 2 in midfield doesn't work against quality teams. Far too much space for Germany to pass through the lines. The formation was wrong, in my opinion. I agree with that. I think this is the problem with England. It's been a problem for a long time, but England used to have much better players, in my opinion, probably than they do now individually in their own positions. They've still got some very good players, but you're not talking about Beckham, Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard here trying to fit them into a midfield. The players that England have now are not as good as those players were then at the height of their game. They're not. They simply aren't.
No, but a lot of those players can get to that because a lot of the England players are not at their peak yet. But
because they're still young,
well
still
on their way
young.
to it. Exactly, so they can do it. Yeah. They can get there. But I just think that we've talked about this loads about them playing with a handbrake on, and I know it's been all over social media, the press. We never look like we're eager to win a game. We look terrified that we're going to lose, and it's not until we're pretty much out of the game that we seem to come to life. Like tonight it was 2-0, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh well, we've got nothing to lose now. We'll go and play. Fucking do it from minute one. Go and win, because a lot of those teams can't play at the tempo we're used to.
I tell you what it is. What England need to do, right, is they need to take their gloves off, roll their sleeves up, and there's only one man for the job, and you know who I'm talking about. Get him in, get Brucey in, give it Brucey till end of season, and he'll sort it out, man. He'll sort it out, absolutely. So I couldn't resist that one. It was far too easy. Two for Life saying, what's happened to Reece James? He looks lost and dare say he was defending worse than Trent. I'm not sure what's happened to him, but his haircut looks like somebody threw some chewer in it. I don't know what the fuck possessed him to get that done at the hairdressers. He's got a pink splodge in the top of his hair. It makes no sense.
I think he's been spending too much time with Paul Pogba, to be fair.
Possibly
in the haircut sticks. That was not a good
wankish.
Look.
Wankish is what I would call that. Absolutely horrendous. But I see your question, PDK. I'm going to come to that in a minute. But moving on to the other international mags then. So obviously there was a spattering of our players that played. There was probably more that didn't play for obvious reasons. But we had Jamal Lewis played for Northern Ireland. Obviously, he doesn't really play a lot for us. He played against Kosovo. We also had Miggy, who had 90 minutes against the UAE in the 1-0 defeat in Austria. Ryan Fraser was an interesting one. He come off the bench and had 2 assists against the Ukraine. He looked quite lively, which was good because he looked shy at the weekend for us. So prior,
how good Scotland actually looked in that game as well.
They did. Yeah, I mean, Scotland have got legs in that side, and they've got energy and they've got vigor. They just need to get them working and get them firing. I think Steve Clark's done a good job there. They were lucky not to qualify. I just think they caught Ukraine in the swarm of everything that was behind them, and I just think that's the reason Scotland didn't get to the World Cup. I think if they hadn't have played Ukraine and they played somebody else, they possibly would have got there. But it was just it was like that Mitchell and Webb joke, wasn't it? Are we the baddies? I think I said that too, didn't I, when we played that game? You know, it was kind of like that. You felt like the whole world wanted you to lose. But you know, it just goes to show you we smashed them 3-0. You know, Fraser, for me as a Newcastle fan, and we're a Newcastle podcast, Fraser getting 2 assists can only be good for us because he'll come back full of confidence, and hopefully he'll put that kind of performance in if he plays against Fulham, which we'll touch on a little bit towards the end. Obviously, the biggest issues that we've had in this international break, Mark, we put it in the thumbnail there. Just all the fucking injuries, mate. Every time you go on Twitter and refresh, there seems to be another player injured. So let's rattle them off. Chris Wood obviously played for New Zealand and then got injured, and he buggered. What's a Scotland? It's a place where podcast hosts are born, my friend. That's what it is, Ash.
Thank you, Ash.
Just like Martin Compson, not me, obviously. But so going back to Chris Wood obviously played, and he smashed his ribs. Didn't he? They had 2 games against Australia. He played 70 minutes in one, then he only lasted half an hour of the other one, and he went in for a challenge and knackered his ribs, didn't he? But he said he thought he heard something pop, didn't he, Chris Woods? That's it.
Yeah. So it's I don't know whether it's just a bit of a knock. He said he felt something pop in there. Hopefully that's not a longer term thing, because the way things are going, you might need him. He was definitely, as the thumbnail showed, he got some ice on his ribs, and it's one of those where it might be not an awful lot of anything. Few days rest, it might be all right. The worry is if he's cracked something, that could be quite painful and be a little bit longer term out. But it was just a lung. I just seen.
It's just a lung. He's got another one. Fucking hell, Ash. Somebody's leg hanging off. Get up. Come on. You got another one. Just keep going.
I think we're just going to hand over the reins tonight to Ash, to be fair.
We might as well. The Ash Show, ladies and gentlemen, the Ash Show. And come on, don't be naughty, Toonfly. If you've just burst my bubble there, I forgot he was probably going to come and rip the piss out of Scotland there tomorrow, mate. I'll keep my eye out on that one. But yeah, I mean, so Chris Wood got a knock. I think he'll probably be all right for the Fulham game. He's a big, tough lad. I think he'll strap his ribs up if it's nothing more serious than just a broken rib or whatever. But the big worry really, mate, was Alexander Isak, wasn't it? He pulled out of
there was nothing more serious than a broken rib.
The postage is broken.
You're so sympathetic.
Well, to be fair, it's not as bad as potentially, a snap ligament or something.
True.
But yeah, but the big worry was Alexander Isak, wasn't it? Given the fact that Wilson is supposedly coming back, but Wilson's like, he's made of glass. If the wind blew one direction, he might pull a hamstring or something. I love him a bit, but he's the most fragile creature I think I've ever seen. He's like a mystical being, beautiful mystical being that gets injured quite easily, like Achilles. But I'm going off on a tangent there, but yeah. So Isak obviously got a bad injury, pulled out of the training squad, didn't he? It looks like he might be out a couple of weeks, mate. That's terrible, isn't it?
That's a really frustrating one, given that how he started, and it's it is when you've got the worries over Wilson anyway, and it looks like he's going to be okay for Fulham, but in what capacity? He's not going to be match fit. So is he gonna? He's not going to potentially last 90 minutes. He certainly probably don't want him to last 90 minutes because you don't want to have to put that on him, especially so quickly after coming back. So to have had Isak around would have been ideal, and it looks like he's going to be out of action for at least a couple of weeks.
As Ash says there, Luke Edwards has done what he loves to do over a glass of Chardonnay and shatter the Newcastle United fans' dreams on Twitter by saying that. I'm just laughing at two coined a phrase there as well, rib tickler. Yeah, I was going to make a joke about Chris Wood not getting a shot on target, so he doesn't need a rib tickler, but I'll leave that one, mate. A little condom humour. Yeah. So the other injuries obviously was a bad one. Sorry, I've got you there. We've lowered the tone tonight, but obviously Isak's a massive one, mate. I mean that is bad, but Bruno again picking up the niggle, didn't he, in the Brazil camp, and that's a worry as well. I know he's had pictures of him back at the training ground lifting weights and all that kind of stuff, and I mean we need Bruno fit, man. I mean he didn't look fit against Bournemouth. He probably shouldn't have played, in all fairness. I think if Anderson had been fit, he might not have played. He might have give Anderson and put Bruno on the bench. But I mean, Anderson's another one. Will he be back for Fulham? And again, mate, we were talking about this earlier, and we'll maybe touch on it more on Wednesday with the boys, and maybe a little bit tonight. But it just highlights how thin this squad is, isn't it? You start getting 2 or 3 injuries, and especially with the intensity that we play at and the speed that we play at. The bodies aren't going to take this, mate, are they?
Yeah, I think Bruno should be okay. I think from what I've read, he's sort of touch and go, but I think he's probably more on he's going to be fit side of things. Anderson looks like he's going to be back.
It seems to be that way.
It was a minor one that kept him out of the Bournemouth game, which is frustrating because I really thought he could have made a massive difference in that. So yeah, I think Bruno's key. But a striker. I mean, the to all intent and purpose, you could be missing all 3 of them for Fulham, and then that really sets a cat amongst the pigeons, doesn't it? Because that would be really, really quite a scary prospect going in with just nobody to play there. I think you're going to end up in that scenario playing somebody like Miggy almost through the middle. Potentially, I can't really see, unless you stick one of the big men up front to try and just lead the line a little bit.
It might be. At that point, yeah, I mean, we'll probably
or even Joe. I think at that point, Joe probably goes back up front, doesn't he?
That's probably it. Yeah. Tune for Life just smashed the same thing in the comments there. I think we might see that. I think we might very well see Big Joe back up top, especially if Anderson's fit to come in the midfield. You've got Willock, Longstaff, Bruno as well. You've got more depth in that midfield area, haven't you? But we'll get into it more in detail on Wednesday, mate. But it's looking again. You're starting to wonder where the goals are going to come from. I mean, for all we know, Wilson might start banging 2 goals, and we'll be back on the Wilson bandwagon again. And then sub him off after an hour or 70 minutes, and get Chris Wood on or stick Joe up front or whatever. But it just highlights the massive lack of depth in the squad. And also it highlights the lack of youth coming through. I mean, Dan Ashworth was making a big point about, signing Anderson on that new contract and how he could be used almost as the focal point, of showing these young players what you can do. And I know we've signed shitloads of youth players to try and improve the quality coming through that youth setup. And I'm sure the coaching, I know Michael Carrick's brother's there now as well. The coaching's improving and everything else. But, you look at teams like Villa, even Liverpool as well. Some of their young ones coming through. The way that they do it. Everton have had a good few young ones coming through, like Shea Gordons and guys like that. We are so off the pace with that, and have been for a long time. Even before Ashley ruined us, we've been so poor at bringing through young players, and that has to change, mate, doesn't it? And I'm not talking about in 7 or 8, 9 years. That has to change like the next 2, 3 years, because with the the kind of FFP rules and the homegrown rules, if you qualify for Europe and all that, we have to have more development coming through the youth academy, Mark, don't we? We can't just rely on international players all the time.
Absolutely. If anything, I mean, you need those players to come through with the ability to sell these players on for and get almost free revenue out of them by not having spent anything on them in the first place, other than the training costs and stuff like that. But you need to be able to have some sense of squad depth where you can dip into the young players, maybe put 1 or 2 of them on the bench and start to blood them in games, because at the moment that there isn't an awful lot there. And it is down to the fact that for the best part of 30 years, there hasn't been a very good reserve or youth setup there to provide these players. You get the odd 1 or 2, you'll always get. You need to have more. You need to have much more investment in that area to get more out of it. And it's just been lacking for so long. It's very telling when there are some much smaller clubs that have much better youth recruitment and development, and these are the clubs that are nowhere near the size of Newcastle. So it's almost embarrassing to a point, isn't it? Because you look at the size of the club and just think you have to have done better, but that has to be done quickly now. And they're doing the right things by bringing some of these players in from elsewhere, but you've got to start using the local area as well and improving the facilities around to be able to get these kids up to speed and with the right levels.
I mean, this has been happening for years, mate. It was the same when we were kids. I mean, Ash is saying a good point there. Even Sunderland's academy shows ours up. When we were kids playing, when we were teenagers, there were scouts there from Sunderland and Middlesbrough. The Newcastle scouts didn't bother their arse.
No one to be seen.
No, remember there used to be that tournament every year, didn't there? Churchill playing fields in Whitley Bay, for anybody in the comments who knows Whitley Bay. And you had Man United scouts there, you had Villa scouts, you had Spurs scouts, you had Celtic scouts, you had Sunderland scouts. Newcastle scouts nowhere to be seen, even back then. And some of the best players in the county were playing and they signed for Ipswich and Norwich and play teams like that. Ridiculous, man. Ridiculous.
I played in a cup final at Hillheads one season. Who we played Callum with? I think we played George Stevenson in a final. I think we ended up drawing and sharing the trophy. What a crock.
Everyone's a winner.
Although funny enough, I actually then went to work with a lad like a few years ago who actually played in goal for George Stevenson. We never handed the trophy over midway through the year, so we kept it for the season.
That sounds about right. You're robbing bandits.
But even at that game, there was a Sunderland scout. No one else. There's no sign of anybody. We never ever had anybody that suggested that they were from Newcastle. Anything. It was always Sunderland. It was always one of the smaller clubs. It was never Newcastle never cast their net that wide to be.
He's done it again.
Thanks, man.
But you're right though. Yeah, it was so disappointing because I remember when we played for Whitley Juniors as well, the Sunderland scouts used to come and watch me, and the Newcastle scouts were just never there. Do you know what I mean? And that attitude needs to change massively by the club. And I think it has slowly but surely, because you hear a lot of 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, and I know some lads I see them on social media and their kids, they do a big signing ceremony and they sign the contract and they've got the crest behind them. And the club have definitely picked up a bit, but it's not been good enough. I mean, likes of the Longstaffs are great, Anderson great, North Shields, Whitley Bay boys. They're the type of lads you need to sign up, man. Paul Dummett, Crammy lad, they're the lads you need to sign up. But when you have them, you've got to develop them, though. I mean, you look at Paul Dummett. I mean, it was his birthday, I think, recently, wasn't it? Paul Dummett's happy birthday to Dummy. He's Newcastle through and through. We love him a bit. But, even Dummett hasn't had the benefit of great coaching, not just from the reserves, but in the first team as well. So Dummett could have maybe been a much better player than he was. Don't get me wrong. Dummett is really consistent and he never lets you down. He's always a steady player, but he's injury prone and fitness. These are things that good coaches can teach you. I remember when Wenger went to Arsenal, and he changed the whole culture, and they stopped getting little niggly injuries, didn't they? Knee injuries and muscle injuries, because he made them fitter. That's what Newcastle have missed out on through years of neglect. And I just hope that that's one of the things the new owners concentrate on. And I think with Ashworth there, hopefully it will be, mate.
Yeah, and like it comes back to who's it? There was a comment earlier on who said, will it speed up the search for new land?
I think it was PDK did that. Yeah, PDK said that.
I think it definitely will. I know there's rumours of certain sites in
Gossip Park was one, wasn't it?
Yeah, Gossip, Long Benton, where the current
the ministry is. The ministry building.
The ministry is. So that's disappearing. But that's
a big site as well. I could get a big training ground there.
But that's not going to happen in the next couple of months. No. So I think that's at least next year. I think it's got to be earmarked pretty quickly. They've got to have planning permission in place to get this done, have the right facilities, the right type of pitches. So, there are, and I've seen stuff from other clubs where they've changed the pitches from you've gone from grass to sort of part AstroTurf and stuff. And
they can like 5G pitches and stuff. Yeah.
So you've got to be careful of that. So the research has got to be done into making sure everything is done right. All the treatment facilities are improved. All the recovery sort of facilities are there for after games and all that sort of stuff. That it's going to cost millions to put it right, but it has to be done. That's got to be the basics now of getting everything like that right, so that you can bring in players from across the area and from elsewhere, and bring into a set of facilities that are absolutely state of the art and world class.
Yeah, absolutely. But Johnny Toonfly said exactly what we did as well, mate. Back in his day, they had 10 players from the school team playing for the county, all went at different clubs, not one from Newcastle. He was at Borough with Jack Charlton. Yes, I'm that old. But you know what it is, mate? It just goes to show you how bad it's been. And we all love KK. I mean, I'll comment a bit more about KK in a second, because I'm keen to get, people's comments on this as well. KK was brilliant for the here and the now, getting your Ginolas and your Ferdinands and all that. But one of the biggest things KK fucked up was the youth academy. And weirdly, when he first came in, you had your Watsons and your Clarks and your Robbie Elliots and, guys like that. And just, I'm so shocked that he did what he did with the academy. And it really did set us back. I think if KK had sorted that out and looked at that differently, mate, maybe, just maybe, we could have kept a hold of a Michael Carrick or somebody like that. Do you know what I mean? It's all these what ifs, isn't it?
Hindsight's easy, isn't it? I mean, look, you go back and you think, well, how did Alan Shearer slip through your fingers when he was in Wall's End?
Way before KK's time, yeah.
That's the
even Steve Bruce, to be fair. Even Steve Bruce, to be fair, at his day, was a great player. Shit manager, but a very good player. He slipped through the net as well.
Do you want the banner up again?
No. We've had enough bacon tonight, mate. It's too late for bacon. We'll not sleep. We'll have popcorn.
This is exactly it. It's those sort of players, and you just think that this is always going to happen. You're always going to lose one or two that will go elsewhere. Yeah. That will end.
We lost so many.
And players develop at different rates. Look at Ian Wright. Ian Wright didn't develop until late on, and he was, that's a good case where you go, well, everybody would have missed out on him because he didn't develop himself.
Les Ferdinand was the same. Les Ferdinand played. He was a paint and decorator, wasn't he? I think he played non-league and he come through that way. And you know what I mean? It's. Yeah, I've just seen that comment come up as well there. So that's a cracker. Newcastle.
We're going to get taken off, aren't we?
Don't you write that article, Ash? We'll lose subscribers in the droves, mate. In the droves. But yes, I mean, yeah, Johnny Toonfly said he remembered KK stopped in the 21s. He did. And that's what really, I think, really set us back. What made matters worse back then, and I am going to talk KK up a bit because this sounds like sacrilege. I'm saying this about KK. But, when you look at what happened to Manchester United and how clever, that'll never happen again. We've said this before, but how clever Fergie was, because he knew he had those kids coming through. He knew how good that they were. You know what I mean? And that was the bit that really surprised me the most about KK flatlining the youth academy, seeing what Manchester United just did with those lads. And you thought we would have had some real quality players back then, I bet you, to come through, and we just didn't do it.
it was down to the pitch, wasn't it? I think a lot of it was down to
the training ground.
Because
I think KK threw a wobbler, didn't he? Did one of his KK wobblers and went, right, fuck it, no more. And then that was it.
Was it not an issue with having to play games at St James's Park, and he didn't want the
pitch getting ruined.
Pitch a certain length of grass. He didn't want the pitch getting ruined for the first team playing on it, and sort of threw his toys out the pram. And I know we don't want to come across as sacrilege because we look at the job that he did.
Absolutely.
But you have to come back and go. He was very much about that moment in time, and there was no forward thinking from, and not just him, from really anybody. And
that's a great comment as well. Exactly. I think timing on that PDK was probably the worst because Bobby Clark was signed, sealed, and delivered, as Stevie Wonder would say, to Liverpool just before the takeover was done. And I think if he hadn't have been, I think that Mike Savamana Stavely and Murdoch would have stopped that in its tracks. I don't think they would have let that happen. One bit at all. It's an interesting comment as well, Mark. Just get your take on this one. To coin a phrase of saying they're not looking after Tony in the squad either. I mean, Ivan Toney's been sensational. After a certain member of the Evermore podcast said he would have a shite season this season, as well as Mitrovic. What do I know? He's obviously well deserving of his space in the England camp. Spoke very well about Newcastle actually as well, Tony, to be fair. So shows a bit of maturity there as well when he got interviewed. But I mean, obviously Harry Kane can do no wrong in Southgate's eyes, maybe. But do you think Tony deserves a bit more of a crack here? And is he just making the numbers up like so many strikers have done, before?
If you're looking at it from England's point of view, they're always going to go. It's going to be Kane, and when you've only got a couple of games leading up to the World Cup, you're going to play him because there's no reason. You're not going to start testing. If there were friendlies in the way, yes, you'd start to use those players. I think the way that tonight went, you were never going to bring him in. I looked at that. Was that not in response? Going back to coin a phrase, was that in response to looking after Tony in the Newcastle squad at that point in time?
Oh, very possibly, very possibly. Yeah, I thought he meant the England squad. Maybe he's right. Yeah, maybe he's right. Yeah. Sorry to coin.
It's another player that has been there and has been allowed to move on without any development really from the club and without any sort of forward thinking in that regard. And it comes I think I've said that phrase quite a few times, but it just shows the complete lack of any sort of foresight, anybody that's worked at the club over the last few years, until the last year, because it's been so poorly managed at every single level. That players like that have just been allowed to just wander off, and Bobby Clark is a huge one to have seen walk away. And I think genuinely, I think he will be the biggest one that will be. You look back on and think, what on earth were we playing that?
I think he'll be a smashing player as well. But listen, just moving slightly on, I did say I was going to give him his props. Just on KK, I put this out on Twitter from our Twitter account the other day. It's about the 1 year anniversary of the takeover is coming up. We're going to have a really special podcast episode next week, guys. Make sure you tune in for that. We're going to have a really special guest on as well. So I'm not going to tell you who it is yet. Just keep an eye on Twitter. Follow us at evermore_nufc to keep an eye out for who's going to be on. But it'll be a brilliant episode, guys. So make sure you tune in for that. But one thing I wanted to ask, Mark, just put them down at the bottom. One thing I wanted to ask about the new owners, Mark, is what we would like them to do. And I think KK is a real strong topic amongst fans, certainly fans of a certain age as well, who remember what he did for the club, both as a player and a manager. Do you think the time's come for the owners to maybe honour KK for, maybe a statue or at the very least a stand, maybe name the stand, the Keegan stand, for what he did for the club?
Potentially, yeah. I definitely agree with PK, who said it in our chat earlier on about him being certainly an ambassador at the club. He has to 100%. Be. Absolutely has to be. He's got, if he wants to be included, bring him in. Get him as part of the makeup in those ambassador roles, because that's a link to the greatness of Newcastle that we've seen. Yes,
he saved us, mate. He saved us from extinction, really. Slipping down the leagues and everything. So.
that changeover, wasn't it, from being at the very bottom of Division 2 to suddenly back in the Premier League within a really short space of time.
With style as well.
Absolutely, yeah, completely. So
Paul's saying a stand for KK, but Jody 2 and Fly saying Joe Harvey deserves a statue before KK. That's a tricky one, Mark. Do you think you've got to give it to the guy who won the last cup for it, or is KK more deserving? It's a tough one, isn't it? Where's Toon Pauls when you need him? Is in the comments.
I get the point of that comment completely, because as good as KK was, and yes, I guess between him and Shepherd, and that was the saving of the club at that time, wasn't it?
Mm.
But it didn't go anywhere. It didn't win anything.
True.
Is Harvey more deserving of it?
Possibly. Yeah, for back then, I would say for what we did, and the cup we won as well, and we didn't have a right to win it, and we still won it. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
That's a very good shout. I think both. I think you can do something to absolutely honour both of them.
I mean, without. Sorry, mate. Go on. Finish. No, you go.
No, go.
Well, I was just going to say that our ground isn't really awash with. Obviously, until recent times, hasn't really been awash with memories of the past. I mean, obviously, we had the Bobby Robson statue, which is brilliant. The Shearer statue, rightly now, is in the grounds where it should be. Obviously, we had Jackie Milburn statue, but there's still so much space around St James's Park in all areas that you could pay homage to the key names of the past. And I think I agree with Paul's comment about at least having a stand for KK. I mean, PDK's just said there, a stand for now, statue when he passes. I'm not trying to bump KK off too early, mate. I hope he has a long and prosperous life, by the way. But I kind of get what you're saying. It's like watching the Chuckle Brothers. I don't know, mate. I can't grow a mustache as well as them, Ash. But yeah, I think that, for me, KK, and two coin of phrases right there, I'm sure that can stretch the budget to two statues. You'd like to think, but I just think for me that Keegan was so important to this club. I think for its modern guys, Mark, that we wouldn't have been the club to be taken over if it hadn't been for KK. So as much as he didn't win a trophy, where he took us from where we were, and listen, I know he had a lot of money from John Hall and all that stuff, but where he took us and how he etched us into the fabric of the Premier League history of just the entertainers, and I love it and all that stuff. He does deserve some credit, doesn't he? And within the club, he has to get it, mate.
Definitely. And I apologise because I've said Keegan and Shepherd before, and that's not what I meant. I meant John Hall.
Well, Shepherd was there. Shepherd was there, wasn't he?
No, but it was John Hall. That was the genesis of this, wasn't it? So
it was. Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think you have to honour both. Definitely. I think when you've got a manager in Joe Harvey that was there over a decade, and was the last manager to win a major trophy, you have to honour that. But certainly, I think that period under Keegan, the saving of them from the depth. Well, I say the depths of Division 2 at the time, where they were only heading in one direction, to get them straight out of it. The following season and into the Premier League and challenging at that point and playing a brand of football that I'm not really sure anybody had really ever seen up until that point. And they pushed Man U all the way, and it was we all know what happened. But you have to do something for both of them, and whether you name a stand after one. I think certainly there's room for a statue, maybe for Joe Harvey in that regard. And like I think the comment said, stand for Keegan for now, maybe, and then a statue later on. And what's funny about statues for people who are still with us.
Yeah, I suppose you got Shearer's there, and I mean Shearer's is kind of synonymous with the club, and he absolutely deserves to be immortalised there. But I agree with Ash's comments here about KK made us everyone's second team. He made us global. He did. He made us a global entity. Teams in Thailand and Ireland, India, and we're wearing Newcastle shirts because of what Keegan did. He never won anything, but what he did for the club, nobody's done that done that since. And Jody to and Fly for saying KK set massive transfer fees away with 50 million quid for Shearer, world record. Started the big transfer trend really back then. You're right. So that's also
that, isn't it?
It's
96, 15 million for a centre forward if Shearer's ill, and you look at what would that be in today's market? It would just be it's insane that when you think it was that cheap, and we all thought it was, you go, Jesus, that's so much. But yeah, what a bargain.
Yeah, PDK's right as well. He didn't win a trophy, but he made memories. There's a good one from Ash I'll come to on in a minute. But just on the Shearer thing, it's quite funny because people have probably seen it on social media. But there's a documentary coming out, I think, next month on the original Ronaldo R9. And I remember, what a player, by the way. But I remember at that particular time, him and Shearer were probably the best in the business. Very, very different players. Bobby Robson actually said before he got Ronaldo R9, he wanted Shearer, and it's just crackers to think. Could you have imagined if Shearer had went to Barca instead of Newcastle, and just what would happen to R9? But what a phenomenal
backup
time.
Though, eh?
Maybe we'd have signed
him. What a backup.
Maybe we'd have signed him, but what a phenomenal play he was. I can't wait to see that documentary, and that'll be absolutely brilliant. And Ash is right there. Statues in general, them. I couldn't believe that myself, Ash, where Birmingham, put statues up of those 4 bellends who, had the pirate jaunty thing done on TikTok or whatnot. I couldn't tell if it was a wind up or not, but it's crackers, man. I think for us, I
was going to cover how quick City were to get statues of Vincent Kompany and Aguero and Aguero one that's not Aguero, but
it doesn't look like Aguero. It's like Gary from marketing or something like that. It just looks like
I can't remember who it was. I can't remember who it was. We said at the time it was a complete lookalike for somebody else. And it was whoever's designed that statue. I genuinely can't remember. I'm sure I sent it to you, but it's an awful statue.
I can't even remember. I can't even remember who it was actually. So I'll see if I can find
it. Somebody in the chat, I presume, but I just remember it being. It looks so much like somebody else, and it was looking at going, who? Why? When did he play?
Tony Cruz.
Exactly.
That's who it is. That's what it is. Tony Cruz from Real Madrid.
Just bizarre.
Yeah, and that's just right. The Ronaldo one that looks like the talking head from Art Attack. You're totally right. I saw a weird thing on statues. We're taking this to a weird place now, but I saw a weird thing on Twitter where there's a statue of Ronaldo. I think it might be in Portugal. I think it is. I'm sure it is. And they've done this statue of him standing there, in his I am Ronaldo Adonis type thing. And I don't know if they've been kind to him, but they've obviously given him quite a large bulge downstairs, right? And there's these women who are posing with.
You noticed this?
No, but it was on Twitter, right? It popped up and it was there. It was on Twitter. Literally, it popped up and it was there on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And there was women holding their faces up against it, licking it, licking the bronze bulge, right? And I'm thinking that's crackers. Imagine that was your mom or your fucking missus or something. You'd be fucking mortified, wouldn't you? She's on Twitter licking Ronaldo's bronze bulge. And then everybody's saying it on social media. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
What has
Have a
happened
word,
to this
ladies.
show?
Have
what
a
has
word.
happened to this?
Put it this way, you can tell it's International Week. We don't have a great deal to talk about apart from bronze bulges and shit statues. But let's end on a positive note, mate. We've talked about the injuries, but on a positive note, Chris, that is for your head, sir. I was like that, Ash, like that. But yeah, so ended on a positive. Maxi busting some moves. So Maxi's come out on social media, dancing away, dancing like a bad motherfucker in his huge big house. And he did say that back soon, #new goal celebration. So we talked about this before. Come on, Mark. Is he just giving us false hope? Because they were saying that he might not be there. You just can't ever tell with football whether it's bullshit or not and whether he's going to be fit, he's going to play. But I mean, looking at all these injuries, Christ almighty, we need him back, don't we, mate, against Fulham?
Yeah, I mean, but you've only got to look at the Bournemouth game, how much that extra spark, that extra creativity that he brings was missing, and if he can be fit for the weekend, yeah, you're crying for him to come back and be playing down that left hand side probably again, and just give you a bit of spot, especially if you're missing one or two others. So hopefully that is that is a preview of something that he can bring to the game at the weekend. Because if that is false hope, that would be frustrating. I think the talk was that it was touch and go with him, that he may be ready for the weekend. But I think the thing it's just with these is they haven't played for a few weeks now, and it's match fitness is going to be key. So unless they've got some behind the scenes games that they're doing in training where they can build that match fitness up, they may struggle certainly to see out the full 90.
Break glass and play Burnley. That seems to be the way to do it, doesn't it? When you need someone to get fit, just play Burnley. Ash is right. We're desperate for a comeback. Him and Voldemort. Yeah. Do you know? I never thought I would have missed John Joe Shelby as much as I have done these last few months. I mean, people talk about this on social media quite a lot. He's absolutely he's integral to this setup. Without John Joe Shelby there and his quality on the ball and his ability to just find space, pick that pass, start the moves off. There was a comment earlier on about Bruno, actually, which I think was a 6 or an 8.
Just going to try and find it, yeah.
Without John Joe Shelby there, I think it was PDK actually put up, without John Joe Shelby there, Bruno is so stifled in this team, isn't he? He's so stifled. We might get into this more on Wednesday, but Bruno is so stifled in this side without John Joe Shelby taking that pressure off him, getting the ball and making it happen. Bruno can go 10, 15 yards further up, can't he, when John Joe's there? Yeah. And I think it's true to say you don't realise how good a player is until he isn't there. But what worries me, there's two folds to this, Mark. So obviously you take on Shelby, but the other side of it is, how can we still be relying on John Joe Shelby? Why have we not got another contingency plan for this within the squad? Players like Tielemans available for 25 million quid reportedly in the summer window. Why the hell did we not make a move for another player who could have took that space?
To be fair, though, I don't think Tielemans would play in that position. And I think if Tielemans was playing in that midfield with a midfield three, maybe it's him, Joe, and Bruno gets pushed further back.
Possibly.
Because Tielemans wants to be further forward. I think that central, almost defensive or quarterback role, if you want to call it that, it's got to be a very specific type of player. And that's not going to be easy to find. You want a proper ball playing defensive midfielder in there.
Someone who's got movement, who's got vision, and can break up the play and then spread it as well. So
you've got to be able to dictate the play. The obvious answer is somebody like Pirlo. You're not going to get that, but you need that player to dictate what happens from that base.
Or like a Michael Carrick. Like a Michael Carrick will be perfect, if they don't grow on trees, sadly. But
no,
Ash is right.
Well, this is the problem.
Yeah, John Joe's a bigger player than any of us knew. We talked a little bit about this on, I think, one of the previous episodes. Now, again, I'm not digging Eddie Howe out here because you're not allowed to do that. But Sean Longstaff, for me, I know he's not got the pace. But when Longstaff was under Rafa and he was sitting back alongside Hayden and he was in front of that back four, he was marshalling that space, he was winning the ball and he was spraying passes around. I think Longstaff has elements of that in his game that you can coach him to be better on. But every time I see Sean Longstaff play, he just tries to be this all-action box-to-box midfielder, which he's not very good at. He's not as good as Joe Willock at it. He's not as good as Bruno at it. He's not as good as Joe at it. So surely that either Sean or this coaching staff have got to push him back, Mark, haven't they, and make him that 6 while we haven't got that 6.
Possibly, but I think a lot of what he does, and we said this last week, what he does, he doesn't do quickly enough. He doesn't think quickly enough. So that style of play that you want the speed coming from that position and the ability to pick and choose when to play long, when to play it into Bruno, the dictation of how you play it. He doesn't have that ability to do. He's lost that confidence in being able to do that. His defensiveness or his defensive qualities just aren't there. He doesn't cover the ground quick enough. And I say when you watch him and it takes 2 or 3 touches for him to even set himself to then play the ball, he's not one of those players that plays with his head constantly on the move. If you watch Bruno, if you go and watch any game that has De Bruyne in, even Grealish for that matter,
Even Declan Rice, to be fair.
Their head is moving constantly from side to side because they are scanning the pitch before the balls come to them, so that when the ball arrives,
he's looking at his defence or he's looking at his forward. He's not doing both, is he?
He's almost blinkered, so that he's that awareness of what's going around him isn't there, and it takes.
That's why he gets caught in possession a lot. That's why he gets caught in possession, because he's not aware, like you say.
He can't play the ball first time because he's not aware of what's around it. He doesn't know quickly enough that he's got time. He doesn't know quickly enough where the next pass is going. With some of those players, certainly Shelby to that point, is good at that as well, as knowing where the next pass should be going before he's even got the ball.
He's already picked it, hasn't he? Yeah, he knows what he's going to do. I saw a great interview with, I was watching Gary Neville doing the thing with, where he does the quick fire questions. It was Paul Scholes. It was quite funny because Paul Scholes, trying to get information out of Paul Scholes, like trying to break it up. A safe, I think. You need the cast of Ocean's 11 to get anything out of him. But one of the things he did say was about, and he put himself in that situation. We all know how good of a player Paul Scholes was. I wouldn't want to be trapped in the lift with him, but he's a great player. But he said how he always plays on the half turn, and he said, so I can see my defender and I can see my forward. That's exactly what you're saying about Sean Longstaff. He's not doing that. What is Sean now? Is he 24, 25? What is Sean now? Is he 24, 25? Around about that age. Should have a check while we're chin wagging. But he's got to nail down a position for me, Sean. If he wants to be part of this squad moving forward, he has to decide what midfielder that he wants to be. Yeah. I just don't think he can be box to box, as Ash rightly says there. He's not quick enough. But I just think that if I was Sean Longstaff, I would be thinking to myself, right, Bruno is Bruno, Joe Willock is Joe Willock. What can I do that's better than anybody else? And I would try to go back to the Rafa spell that he had when he was sitting back alongside Isaac Hayden, and he just looked a much better footballer then than he does now. And I don't know whether it's just that's not his game and he just can't do it, and he's always going to be this kind of squad player. I did laugh at this Tune for Life comment there. He did say that his favourite ground was St James's Park, mate, but that's because he scored about 95 goals when he came up. I remember the little bastard scored all the time. Then Rudy took over and he started scoring all the fucking time as well. But, I mean, Paul Scholes was phenomenal. You're not going to get a player as good as that unless you go out and sign one for multiple millions of pounds. But I'm just not sure what the future holds for sure. There's maybe a special episode we can do separately, Mark, in terms of how he's developing as a player. But I think in January, I've said this to you before, but I'm sure we'll touch on it more towards the window opening. But I still think, as much as Newcastle need a right winger, I think we need a number 6, mate. I really, really believe that. We need somebody who can sit. There was talks of Alvarez, wasn't there, from Ajax? I don't know how plausible that would be. It'd be very expensive, but we need a player.
I think the boat might be gone on that one because I think there will be bigger clubs now, Champions League clubs that will take him away.
The likes of Liverpool, they need that midfield presence and people like that. Do you know what I mean? They're massively lacking that.
Look, Sean is 24, so he's got lots of time ahead of him, and he's got bits in his locker that are good.
Yeah, he's not a bad player.
He's not a bad player at all. He's very much a squad player, and I think there is that. I think we're missing a piece in that hole in the midfield. But look, we come back to what we said before. This is only the start. We're only a year in. Yeah, this only started last October.
I know it's easy to forget that sometimes, isn't it? You get ahead of yourself a little bit.
You see the pound signs. You see you see the money that could be there. But this is still just a year into this, and there's been such progress since January. Yeah, since the new players came in, and that really this Eddie Howe system clicked. So those players will come. The squad depth will come. In the meantime, Eddie Howe's got to do a little bit better job of getting players like Longstaff a place. And if he can do similar to what he's done already with the likes of Kraft and Joe Linton and that, he can create him into a very serviceable backup, even a starter. You might find that in a year's time he could do it, but
if he can kick on,
make him a serious contender to be that backup number 6. He can do a hell of a job with him, and it's another one that save you an awful lot of money.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting there. Just to finish on this last comment from Ash, which is brilliant. Liverpool do need a replacement for number 6, but for Nunez, Ash says, because thank God we didn't send that love. There's been some disgraceful shooting from Nunez cropping up on social media. I know everyone has mares in training, and maybe he's just unlucky that he keeps getting caught out. But yeah, I'm quite glad we didn't get him as well. To be fair, I'm glad we got Isak, but we need to get him fit. But I think that was pretty much wrapped up, Mark, for this week. So thanks everybody who's tuned in. Thanks for the comments. As I mentioned at the start, if you're new, if you're here for the first time, good to have you on board. Please click that like and subscribe button. Help us get close to that 1900 mark. Massive milestone for us, especially how young our channel's been. I think we started just after the takeover, I think. Mark, didn't we? As evermore,
15th of December, so we were a couple of months behind it. So yeah,
so we're not even a year old, and two have grown. In such a massive way in the short period of time. Is thanks to all you wonderful people subbing, just as PDK has done tonight.
Thank you very much,
PDK. You're a top man. We're going to be back with the lads on Wednesday for More Evermore. Thank you very much. Tune for life. Hopefully we'll see you there too, bud. We'll be back with the boys on Wednesday. We'll be talking about the Fulham game in a bit more detail, and we'll also be talking about shout out to RX and a little bit of talk about Mitro and see what we think about him. So make sure you tune in for that, guys. Live at 7. For now, this is me and Mark signing off. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll catch you later.
Take care, guys.